But why does anything matter? Like, why does any of it matter? We'll just go through the list. Like, why does life matter? The species matter, earth matter, consciousness matter, spirit matter, economy matter, wealth matter, possessions, popularity, fame. Why does any of it matter? Why at all? Just why does it matter? Any of it. Pick it.
Why does anything matter? I'm joined once again by four-time guest Maestro Hamilton Souther, and we dive into exploring why anything actually matters. Hamilton is one of my favorite guests as someone who has been serving ayahuasca in Peru for over 20 years and done over 3,000 psychedelic journeys. His understanding of consciousness is at such a different level to almost anyone on the planet. And I'm always absolutely delighted to have him on the podcast. And we actually kind of continued with a part two of this conversation on his podcast, the Blue Morpho podcast. And once that is released, I'll then link this into the show notes, although it might not be there straight away. So be on the lookout for part two of this conversation. Now, before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe. And if you enjoy the video, hit like and share it with someone that you think will get value from this. If you want to find Hamilton or myself, the links will be in the description below. And that's it from me. Let's get into it. So I'm laughing. I'm laughing just because for anyone listening now, we'll just hit record. And I asked, hey, what should we get into today? And you said, why anything matters. And then you streamed off a long list of all the things. And I couldn't help but laugh because I thought, oh, wow, this is big. Okay, let's do this.
But why does anything matter? Like, why does any of it matter? We'll just go through the list. Like, why does life matter? The species matter, earth matter, consciousness matter, spirit matter, economy matter, wealth matter, possessions, popularity, fame. Why does any of it matter? Why at all? Just why does it matter? Any of it. Pick it.
All right. Why does it matter? I mean, immediately for me, two things come up. One is because of the meaning we attach to those things, which gives it the meaning, right? That'd be one reason. But then I guess something that comes up is then beyond that, is there something deeper within us that knows it matters simply because it does matter? They're the two things that come up immediately, is like how much of it is just because of the meaning we attach and how much of it is because it actually does inherently just matter. And there's a term that Gaffney refers to, which is anthro-ontologically, which I can feel it in my body and it actually just does matter. So they're the two things that come up immediately. What comes up for you?
I go back to a play on words that it matters because it's matter. It's actual matter and we can't explain it. So at the most abstract and also the most concrete at the same time, which I think is miraculous, that you matter. You actually are made of matter. And as you drill down on matter, it gets spookier the further you get into it. And the whole universe is that way too. And then from that, everything that is of matter has some kind of innate importance to us. We give it that importance. Some of it's culture, some of it's pure culture, and you could debate the validity of culture, but it has a deep importance to us. And I think from there, you have to look at that aspect of yourself that is that deep, and it conjures within you that question, like it matters because I matter, and I have to know myself inside myself well enough to be able to bring some kind of context or meaning to that.
How much of the things that matter to us do we think are kind of like really quite primitive, based on survival replication value? Like how many of the things in our life are based on this survival replication value, and they've just been extrapolated. So at one time it might have been basic level resources and they were required for survival, replication of the species, and then we extrapolated on that to the point where the resources that allowed us to survive, we now survive in the pursuit of resources.
Well, I think if you start at the core, the fundamental needs of us, the fundamental core biological needs still matter equally in every second of every day. And if you don't have it, you die. And on top of that, there is an economic extrapolation, and you could debate the morality of it, but it's where your core needs are sold back to you. So you have a core need for clean air, and if you don't have it, you need a mask, they'll sell you the mask. They being one of us, one of our own species that went to solve the problem, but where did the air get contaminated in the first place? By our own species. You need clean water. There used to only be clean water. Now it's all dirty water. Who made it all dirty water? We made it dirty water. Who cleans the water? Another group of us who then sells it back to us. And they might sell it back to us in a poisonous plastic bottle. Right? Sexuality, you have core sexuality and biological needs, and they're sold back to you in a myriad of forms that sex has been manipulated and twisted and packaged and repackaged and rebranded. But it doesn't change the fact that everybody goes through puberty, and when they do, sexuality becomes a core need. So you can just keep going on and on and on. Same thing with food, same thing with shelter, same thing with clothing, etc. And so those core needs are finite, and they relate to each one of us, and it's the foundation of the economy. On top of the foundation of the economy is an extrapolated layer, and that extrapolated layer goes ad infinitum, like the snake eating its own tail, into like, okay, now I have my core basic needs. What do we do with that? And how do we grow beyond that? And that's financial economy, market economy, your own career, your own work, your own participation, and the meaning that you give to that, or it's spiritual, religious, philosophical, personal, etc., relationships, friends, marriages, and then that all leading again back to that biological need.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating when you consider how much of it does get sold back to us and the snake eating its own tail. So, all right, let's have a look at these then slowly for what actually matters and what does it mean to matter. 'Cause it's and how do we know what matters? How do we know what matters?
If we look at the memes in the world right now, it's memes that matter. And memes are a mind virus. It's a collective mind share, and that creates culture. And so our collective mind share around memes itself, whether it's the meme of a stock or the meme of a crypto token or the meme of a certain style in clothing or a meme of a certain use of language, that meme right now is what is giving the importance to what matters. And a great piece came up in a Twitter space last night that I was co-hosting for our landslide project, where Bloomberg is covering a meme token that's called cock in you. So how did an institution like financial institution group Bloomberg have to come to this place around this meme called cock in you? And the reason is because it has over $200-300 million market share. That's why. Market capitalization.
So within meme culture, I just wrote down then, as you were saying that, I just wrote down meme equals intimacy. It seems as though when you said whether it was clothing or a crypto token, is the thing that starts to gain traction the thing that people buy into, where at some level they then identify with that thing and they enter into an in-group which offers a sense of intimacy with the thing itself, but also with the collective other people that are a part of it? Do you think it's related to that at all?
That's what I call culture. So exactly what you just said, I think, is like the modern definition of culture. It's a nature of symbolism and an object that you relate to and you claim as being core to yourself. Whether you belong to the group that the symbol represents, like a flag or a symbol that you would wear around your neck, or even if you're in a tribal society, something that specifically identifies you, like a tattoo or a ritual scarification, something that identifies you to the nature of the group, or it's something that you bring to your core matrix of identity, which of course is represented to your name, your nationality, your gender, your race, etc. So you have this matrix of identity. So you either bring it in to you or you offer yourself into the nature of that group. And I think it's happening at the same time for both sides of that paradigm to now belong in such a complex culture that is global at the same time.
I just want to take 30 seconds to tell you about the Freedom Within Mastermind that I launched back in January. I was working on this for 12 months where I was really taking the absolute deepest dive into everything I understood about what it is to be human, consciousness, and life itself. It's broken down to 3 phases. The freedom from the past, where we look at everything that holds us back from being the truest expression of who we are. And doing that, it leads to phase 2, which is the freedom to be who you are completely, to be fully expressed the way in which your soul truly desires. And then the last phase is the freedom to become everything that your heart and soul yearns to become, the way that the acorn yearns to become the oak tree. So far, the people that are involved have had incredible awarenesses, insights, transformations, and truly, not only do I feel honored to be in this position of leadership within the mastermind, but also absolutely delighted to see this level of transformation. Now, this is really deep. It's a high level program. It's not entry level or for beginners. We really go deeply into this. And actually, a lot of the people that are involved in the mastermind are already coaches themselves that just want to take it that level deeper. So if this is something that calls for you, where you want to go all the way into the deepest parts of your own psyche, being, and what it is to be you, and to find out what it could really mean to be you at a whole new level. So if this does interest you, then feel free to hit the link below to find out more and schedule a call to learn about the masterminds. All right, that's it from me. Let's get back into the episode. Do you think that with things like memes mattering, and this brings us back to the original question actually, and I know it's there as I'm saying this, but I was going to say, do you think we've lost sight culturally on what actually matters? But then that does bring us back to what actually matters. But something tells me that culturally we may be putting our attention on things that matter, but it feels like maybe we've lost sight on something else, and that's why our attention has turned to the types of things that actually matter to us now.
I think the key around the notion of meme is virus. And we had an idea of a virus being a very small piece of molecular code that somehow gets into you and changes you. And now it's thought-based, not molecular-based. So it's traded in language and mind share and pixels flashing in your eyes, and all of that's still becoming part of you. And so I think we have to go to this idea of virus. And viruses can have an incredible importance, and they've had incredible importances to humanity. Viruses have killed more humans than humans have killed each other, although humans have used viruses as a weapon. They've weaponized them. And I think what's important about the notion of virus in the current day and age is the idea of it having equal importance and shaping of culture. Like, look what happened during COVID, where culturally people decided to change behavior, sociologically, socioeconomically, sociopolitically, right? They just decided to change the global ritual of daily behavior simply because of that virus. And it doesn't mean that we're placing our attention on what really matters in the grand scheme of things, but we make it matter for a short period of time because of the mind share. And it can actually turn our awareness away from the things that really do matter, like maybe climate evolution, which people call climate change or climate disaster, like the meta crisis. It takes your mind away from those things, and it keeps us from solving those problems for a period of time, which might actually be the purpose of those viruses to begin with. But it doesn't mean they don't have tremendous value and importance to us in a socioeconomic way.
On that, how much of COVID do you think was the actual virus versus how much of it was the mind virus?
Personally, I think COVID is one of the least destructive diseases we've faced in a long time. period. I think it's like, where did it go? Like, honestly, where did it go? The people went back to normal behavior, and it's rampant. It's COVID. It's still 100% COVID as much as it was before. It's mutated and changed in many different ways, and there are more dangerous forms of it and less dangerous forms of it, et cetera. But it's still in existence. There's COVID cases across all the hospitals all the time, but it's not holding the mind share of the fear and the panic around it. It's not holding the mind share of how disastrous it could be or apocalyptic it could be. And so I actually think that part of it was entirely human created. I think that's a psychosomatic expression of the virus that moved from code itself in your cells doing things that could harm some of us to a massive greater disease, which is the panic and fear that people experience exacerbated by that kind of influence. And then you have like the propaganda channels and the news channels, et cetera, pumping a narrative associated with it that had at that time no mechanism to be able to know or test the truth or validity of that information. You put all of that together, and that creates the meme virus COVID, not the actual like biological virus COVID.
Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction. It feels like maybe it was the meme virus that created more damage. And of course, I feel like there's a thing now where we have to then follow that with the disclaimer to say, I'm not saying no one was affected by the actual biological virus, but globally, it seemed like a huge amount of the impact was the meme virus, the memification of what it was.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, even the little cartoon of the little spiky ball going around, that's not even what the thing looks like. That's an abstraction, right? That's a cartoon. And people are scared of that cartoon, in no way diminishing the actual impact of the virus itself, right? The virus itself had whatever true impact it had. And for everyone who's been, harmed by that, my heart goes out to them in deep compassion. And that completely isolated from this other kind of meme associated with it. And it's a neat distinction because of what is mind disease or what is mind virus and what is actual biological nature of virus. And we have to, understand that. And then what matters about that? Everything matters. But again, it doesn't mean that that's allowing us to focus on what matters more or in a hierarchy of importance would have greater importance to us around those natures of basic needs. Like, how are we going to survive as a species, not just confront something like COVID?
Yeah, and as you say that, what matters more, and you mentioned just a few moments ago about attention, and it seems like something we're at a crisis of is the placing of our attention. And our attention really has become maybe the greatest commodity. And I'm just trying to think, maybe it always was in ways, but maybe it's more noticeable now in modern era of how commodifiable our attention is. And I feel like most people don't know how to orchestrate the placing of their attention, which then loops back into this idea of what matters. Well, I guess in a way, what matters is where we place our attention, but it feels like there's an inability to place our attention intentionally.
I think that's an incredible point. And it takes me to an idea of sovereignty and where your sovereignty begins and ends as an individual. And with intention and attention, you have a choice. And so, you have a device like this. You have a choice what to put on the device. You have the choice which device. I don't think you really have a choice right now in today's age to have one or not. If you're going to be in the global economy, you're going to have one. So that choice has kind of already become a necessity, just like you have to have clothes or just like you have to have some kind of education or know how to speak. Like, okay, that's a prerequisite to just be in the game, right? But to choose what's on it and then to choose how much time you spend on it and to choose where you put your attention, that is the number one commodity. Because you think about it, if it's not in your awareness, you don't know it exists. So if you didn't give it attention so that the other side of that attention could let you know it exists at all, to you it doesn't exist. It's not in your worldview, even though it could be the most popular thing going on out in the world. Like, think about people in the world, and they exist, that have never heard, ever. They have literally never heard of Jesus. They have never heard of Buddha. They have never heard of Muhammad. They don't know that that exists. They don't know that those religions exist. They don't know, and that covers 4 billion, 5 billion people that they don't know have that in their head. And that just shows you the difference. Now, those same people that may not know, this is really interesting, the same people that may not know that those other religious figures from the past exist, they know Coca-Cola exists. In the modern era, a person may not know that Jesus existed or exists as part of a religion, but knows that Coca-Cola exists. Right? And that's about attention. What has captured their attention and their basic need. So what does the basic need of Coca-Cola in its most basic form represent? It represents sugar. It represents calories. It represents a sweet drink. Right? So in your basic needs, it represents this kind of stimulant that you need to be able to run your brain. But running your brain doesn't mean you have to know some of the most important things that have happened to our society ever in history. There are a lot of people in the world that have no idea that there's ever been a nuclear threat. And they have no idea that nuclear weaponry even exists. Right? But they're still part of Homo sapiens sapien as humanity. And so that tells you, and the reason why I'm making this like really big polarization is to show that if you haven't given it attention, it's not in your mind space at all, which is why that commodity is so important.
So this is somewhat related, somewhat unrelated, but it was an idea that I was riffing on 2 nights ago. And it was on how, okay. So in Hinduism, is I think it's the essence of supreme absolute consciousness. And it was the sound and the vibration of which all other creation was made manifest from. And if everything is vibration, then it all began with an original vibration. And I was wondering how, I was just playing with this idea of forever and time, and how everything began with that vibration, how much every other vibration then contributes to the continual vibration. That the Big Bang didn't just happen, well, was it 13 or 26 billion? Because I thought it was 13, but apparently science has suggested maybe it's 26 billion years ago now. But either way, the Big Bang happened then, but it actually hasn't finished because the universe is still expanding. So it's like Big Banging. It's like it's still going on. But how much does everything we do, does the vibration that's coming out of my throat, my voice now, does that vibration enter into the wall? Does it enter into the desk? Does it enter into the bottle? And how much do we continue to that ongoing vibration? And then I was wondering, if there's a vibration, you can almost imagine moving it, and that alters the fabric of time forever. I'm now a part of that vibration in a new way. I've contributed to it. And then is that stored in the memory of God, we could say? Is there a memory of God that gets stored in, where if someone hasn't heard of Jesus or hasn't heard of Coca-Cola, if it's generationally old enough, can it still contribute to, in some way, like contribute to the memory of God, where actually they may still be able to access that and that become part of their attention, even if it's never happened in actual life? And I feel like you might know what I'm talking about, even though I might not have articulated that particularly well. And there is a loose, tedious thread to what we were just talking about with that.
I think I can work with that. I can work with that. So
probably only you could.
I can work with that. Let's frame it. We have uh, an idea, let's go with an idea of something that's ever present and part of the origin of creation itself. In this case, the idea of Om. And maybe Om is a symbol we're using to describe, if there were a sound to Big Bang, the creation of sound. And that vibration, meaning that there is one whole vibration and all individuated vibrations are part of that whole vibration at all time. So there's just an emanating of vibration on a universal level. And if you isolated any sound, any vibration, one crash of a wave over here, one crash of a wave over there, one piece of speech over here, one cosmic explosion over there, all of it is part of that. So this great multiplicity of vibration adds up to all the vibration at the same time. So it's like there's one massive vibration and you take all the individuated vibration and you just count it, that one plus that one plus that one plus that one simultaneously adds up to this entire vibration. Right? And now you have this entire vibration going on. Is that the vibration of God? Is that the memory of God? Is that the Akashic record? Is that what's really happening here? And I say yes. So first there, let's just create a premise and we say yes to that. Yes. If God has memory, then that is the memory, and it's in there, and it's somewhere in what I call real history, which is defined just as what really happened. And it includes the telling stories of all the other history that isn't what really happened, but it's just what really happened. So it doesn't matter how long we count it. People counted Big Bang at 13-something years, then they counted at 26 billion years. They could count it at 100 billion years. That's people counting, figuring out. And it becomes part, again, of that vibration and that great Akashic record. And anything we do changes it, alters it, and adds to it. And we're trying to discern in this the impact that it has. Like memory in a computer, like, okay, it doesn't really matter as much if you do all this stuff on a computer, but the computer has no memory and you can't continue what was there before. It's just gone, right? It's like an echo down a canyon that if all it is gone, you heard it, but it doesn't echo to anything else. There's no way to access that echo. So this idea of permanence and memory is really important to our ability to bring continuity and thread and continuance to the nature of the experience. And then also ask the question, could others be influenced by that? And that takes us into the idea of a collective consciousness, a collective awareness, a collective mind share. And then it can even drill us down into the idea of matter again, taking us to that original thread of, does this matter? Well, if it matters of the universe and it matters of the body, and like I said, it gets really spooky the more you drill down. So you drill all the way down to vibration, and you get really spooky interaction. You get this really interesting interplay where a quark could be in your body and my body and switching while we talk. It could be going through the listeners right now, and it could be going to different star systems and coming back without time passing. It's mind-blowing. That's what I mean by like really spooky. Like aspects of you could be mind sharing galaxies right now, and that wouldn't just be like fantasy or an ideology or a delusion, but actually that's our physics. That's what our scientists are telling us, hey, that's really happening, right? And so you have this idea of like, well, what impact am I making on that? And what impact could that have on others that have never been, they have never had the opportunity to give their attention to something like that? And I think that's exactly what's happening. And it goes down into our DNA and it goes down into our core code where we are of the universe, and it affects the next generations, and it affects our procreation. It affects the nature of our biology. It affects the collective mind and the mind that we come into the world with. And it's part of our ancestry, and it's part of the ancestry of our consciousness. And often when we talk about consciousness, people act like it's a vacuous space, but I disagree with that concept. I think our consciousness is filled with more and more ancestral forms than even when you look at space and you see vast distances between stars and galaxies. I think it's a matrix that is filled with energy and patterns and the shaping of this collective mind share that has been going on of Earth for millions and millions and millions of years, including going all the way back to predecessor animals before there ever were humans that were part of the planet. So it's not just Homo sapiens sapiens specific, but Homo sapien came from something. So it has a continuance from that deep history all the way into our most recent history, all the way into the now. And we're actually being affected by all of it. And so I would say literally all of it matters. And that deep wisdom of something like the Om, that deep wisdom of this idea of a vibration, holding vibration and vibrations, this oneness able to hold multiplicity in the grandest forms of multiplicity, meaning all the sounds we're making right now, all the sounds that nature's making right now, all the sounds that the universe is making right now, and all of that being part of that vibration is what's happening. And to me, it takes us to a core importance and point of what role do we have in that? Who are we in that? In that thing that's so vast, what kind of co-creator are we in that? And what are we giving our attention to? And do we have a responsibility to shift our attention from things that matter, but maybe don't matter as much as other things? And that is a core choice we have to make right now.
I like how the fireworks went off for that moment.
AI.
AI. Yeah, thank you. No. And do you think that placing of the attention in that way really is something that's meant to kind of go hand in hand with the maturation process? That as we mature, that we change where we place our attention. And as I say that, it makes me think, for example, was that the part of an initiation process in a time before now? Because I don't think we have that really. And in some ways, it seems like I know a lot of adults now that are my kind of age that kind of do the things that I was doing when I was a teenager, that I stopped doing around 19 or 20, but it seems like a lot of culture are still kind of maybe grown into adults, but their attention is almost still still quite juvenile in a way. Do you think there's been this disruption where it's impacted our ability to place our attention in a mature way?
Every pattern we experience, we were taught. And you have to ask yourself, taught by what? Mm-hmm. And we are taught by our society. And the impact that our society has to be able to suppress development is extreme. So in the last 50 years, there has been a desire to perpetuate childhood and a juvenile nature and a youth worship within Western developed cultures. So instead of worshiping the elders who had lived the longest with multiple rites of passage in their life that gave them great wisdom, we've worshiped the intelligence of the youth. We've worshiped the beauty of the youth. True worship, like religious worship. We've created procedures to try to preserve our youth. And with that, we have actually retarded in our societies what in traditional societies were traditional rites of passage. And we have supplanted traditional rites of passage, which would grow you and grow you and grow you and change your behavior in a hierarchical structure to actually perpetuate you in an economy designed to have you continue the behaviors that you were doing as a youth, so that the nature of the companies or the people who benefited from your perpetuated state of juvenileness would ultimately gain more. So, for instance, take the video game industry. There is no desire in the video game industry for you to outgrow it. On the contrary, the video game industry wants there to be 18-year-old players, or even 5-year-old players, 10-year-old players, 20-year-old players, 30-year-old players, 40, 50, 60, 70, at your deathbed playing video games, and pack more and more and more of the population into playing video games. And the video game industry grows, and that for that industry is considered good, and it takes your attention to play that. There's no desire in social media to have the social media industry have people outgrow social media and just abandon all their accounts. Like, well, at 25, that was a kid's game. I'm out. Done. Off, 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 off. It would kill the industry. So when you look at the nature of these industries, there's a need to perpetuate you in a continuation of use and not allow you to transcend the nature of that behavior. And it creates cultural ritual. Whether it's good for you or bad for you is irrelevant. It's only a question of whether it's legal or illegal in Western developed societies. And so if it's legal, it gets perpetuated and it becomes daily culture or daily ritualized behavior for everybody. And with that, a suppression of your natural development.
Yeah, and it seems like the promise, and I mentioned meme equals intimacy before, but it seems like still those other things are based on a promise of some type of pseudo intimacy, whether that is the gameplay, which allows you to be more intimate with that moment in the playing of the game than the intimacy you feel. I don't necessarily just mean human to human intimacy, but just intimacy with your experience of life outside of the game or on social media. Does that offer, again, a pseudo intimacy where it's social, and it in some ways offers a type of intimacy that you might not feel when you're at home because you feel more connected, yet it's futile and it's actually less connected. But I'm just wondering if this connection between matter and intimacy, if that's a common thread there, because it's something that I really like that I learned in Belgium at Mark Gaffney's mystery school, I just sat with, was the idea that all the way up and down the evolutionary chain is the desire for intimacy, whether that's a proton with an electron, that they're drawn together, it's intimacy. And intimacy is the thing that drives reality, is for this ever deepening of intimacy. And I just wonder how many of these things that take our attention is for some type of like pseudo intimacy, and is that what creates what matters?
Well, let's look at our core need for intimacy. Intimacy represents that union and interaction. And you have a core need of intimacy that is biological, social, and personal. Now, if the social ritual of the interaction of the intimacy has within it a nature of conflict, it hurts the intimacy. So think of the intimate relationship you have with your parents. As soon as there's conflict in that relationship, it's not a pleasant form of intimacy anymore. It becomes a horrific, traumatizing thing. And think about it in a sexual relationship or a romantic relationship. As soon as you go past like the golden glory phase of that relationship and the conflict starts to enter into that, it disrupts the nature of that intimacy and it starts to create a pattern of pain and suffering associated with it. Right? And so our need for intimacy doesn't go away. We have the core nature and the need for intimacy, but what happens in a place of conflict and fear about the intimacy itself, it drives us into our mind. And when we're driven into our mind, everything else outside of the mind is a place of fear. So the intimacy with nature is scary. You could get hurt. The intimacy with a city is, potentially dangerous. You could get robbed or mugged. The intimacy with an activity could result in some kind of injury, etc. And you get driven into this state of fear, or you could be rejected, or you could be somehow hurt by another, etc. And so we as a society create social rituals where we have a buy-in. We've agreed to it that allows for that conflict to be there, but not be so painful to us. So if you're playing a video game with somebody else, having an intimate experience of interacting, you're doing so through the game space. You're given the parameters in which you're interacting through, and it includes a for and against and a winner and a loser within the nature of that game without it being so consequential. And so now you're playing in a kind of intimacy, and it's a structured intimacy, and you're protected and safe within that intimacy, and you can be in your mind in it, and you can be safe in that. Right now, if we want to disrupt that and create a genuine form of intimacy, we have to get over our fears. And that's something that I think is really important, is that we learn how to turn our fear off so that we can increase our intimacy. Turn our fear off of nature, you increase your intimacy with nature. Turn your fear off of your partner, whatever, that they could hurt you or leave you or harm you, and you increase your intimacy. That they may say something that shocks you, or they may traumatize you in some way. You turn your fear off of your parents, and you realize that they gave you the gift of life, and you have your own autonomy, and you have your own stature within that, and you can just meet them as an individual, and that you are protected and safe by yourself in that interaction. We learn to turn our fear off, and then the intimacy naturally is increased, and our desire for a limited social ritual goes down.
Yeah, so it really seems as though there is this innate desire for, you said union and being one. It's like that. Maybe there's this desire for oneness because on some level we know that we are a part of that one. So there's this innate desire for union and intimacy, which you could say is traveling this way, but then in the opposite direction is this fear of it because of the pain that we experience in the separation of the very thing that we want. And it feels like there's two forces going in opposing directions.
I think that that's exactly right. But the opposition force of the fear, we have to realize first is part of our matter. So why is fear so compelling? Right? Fear is so compelling because it's part of our matter. It's part of our biology. It's part of our survival instinct. But on top of that, we've abstracted cultural layers where we've taken rationally out of our mindset the idea that we're going to be eaten by a lion or an anaconda or something like that. We've taken out of it the core dangers that, like, lurking around the corner is something that could kill me, etc. Like, we live in pretty sheltered, safe environments, but it didn't take the fear out of us. And so then we've abstracted layers of fear and, on top of it that have become more nuanced and more subtle, and they become more mind-based and more emotional-based, etc. But we have to take responsibility that we're the creators of the fear, and that we can have a completely unique and different relationship with consciousness, with life, with the mind, with ourselves, and with each other that allows for a much deeper form and realer form of intimacy by learning how to turn our fear off. When the fear isn't rationally needed, instead of driving our behavior, we need to have the fear in our consciousness limited way down. We need to learn how to really dampen that and allow ourselves to have a more natural expression that isn't so hyper enculturated and so hyper, formed or shaped by that fear program that we have running inside us.
What would your suggestion be for people that hear this and think, well, how do I turn that fear down? Because I know for me personally, whenever I feel fear arise, and I understand that I'm probably rare in this way, I lean into it. I don't try and turn away. I go, what's going on here? And I'll go and try and find a space to actually push myself further into it. And I'll ask, well, what is it here that I'm not wanting to face or look at? And I want it here, right in my face, because I want to know what is this thing that I'm afraid of. And again, I understand that that's not indicative of most people, because most people, if they sense the fear, it's let's turn away from that. What would your suggestion be to people to begin navigating that? Because I imagine, as your rich history within shamanism and the fear that people face when it comes to ceremonies, I imagine there's a lot of wisdom with those two things connected.
The compelling nature of fear is its ability to overwhelm our senses. And so when you want to look at fear, what you're doing is turning to it and confronting it and facing it. And somebody else freezes, and somebody else gets small and tries to hide, and somebody else runs. Right? And they're all different strategies of dealing with fear. I think the first thing I look at is there any logical reason for this fear at all? Or is it a complete delusion? right? And the logical reasons could be that I've been triggered. And if I've been triggered, then I need to learn how to turn that trigger off, right? Like you've added something to the ohm when I'm triggered. So I need to learn to now center and calm down again. And if the logical reason is that there's some danger in my environment, then I need to be clear-headed and minded about how I'm going to navigate that. Like, hey, I don't like the way that looks down that street. I'm going to turn this way. Or I don't like the way this person's talking to me. I'm going to end this conversation and get out of it, et cetera. Like if there's a real logical reason for the nature of that fear, and then we can address it like you're doing. If I'm just completely delusional and it's a kind of paranoia that's going on, I need to learn, like I say, how to like really turn that off. And what you're going to find is that you've gotten into dissonance in your mind. Your mind is creating delusional fantasy to what's true and real in your life. And so all of those things I treat with a practice that I call sanctuary. And sanctuary is how we create a space for us to be in. We create it, we take responsibility for it, and we create a space for us to be in that allows us 5 core principles. And the first one is grounding, balancing. So I ground my energy, I balance my energy, I harmonize my energy, I heal if there's anything that needs to be healed, and then I reorient. And the reorienting could be to centeredness, calm, clarity, logic, and reason again, but it ends that hall of mirrors in the mind. It allows you to address the fears legitimately if there's something that needs to be addressed. And you can take that into sanctuary to be able to find the guidance and support that you need. And that could come from a spiritual teacher or a coach, or it could come from a visionary ceremony or a meditation. It could come directly to you, kind of from the ethers itself, and a kind of awakening or download that you get. But it provides you that buffer for a period of time from the intensity of what you're facing. And so sanctuary is the core practice that I use to teach us how to address our fears.
Nice. That delusional fear, do you think that we, or a certain, like people, in some way desire it? Like, is there a payoff that people get by experiencing that type of delusional fear?
The big payout of delusional fear is your ability to tweak yourself. It's like a drug. Mm-hmm. It's your own drug. It's your own internal horror movie. There's industry built out of this. And you get to create a drama inside yourself, again, about attention and where you're placing your attention and what you're giving matter to a nature of a mind state that is an internal protest to what you're really facing and dealing with in your life. And it's part of meme virus. It's part of a disease that we've created for ourselves. And we all share in the collective mind space a certain amount of delusion. And you can find it really easily. It's not like a catastrophic thing. It's just like you think things are going to be one way and it goes another way. You think an election's going to go one way and it turns out another way. You think that you're going to do this tonight and you're all planned for it, and then everything collapses and changes and you end up doing something completely different. That whole time you were thinking something that wasn't how it was actually playing out is a series of delusional thoughts. Mm-hmm. And if you really buy into them and you really believe in them, and you can't create space for yourself where you're saying like, okay, that's how I'm thinking, that's not what's really going on here, then you get into the nature of that delusion. And so it's self-perpetuated, and it's a drug that's incredibly intoxicating.
Yeah, as you were saying that, then it reminds me of something I was thinking about recently, which is most people that think they have control in their life, it's because the things that are happening are the things that they believe are going to happen, and the things they believe are going to happen are most probable. So when I think this series of events are going to take place and they are the most probable, and then they do, I think I've got control over what's happening. And then when something happens that's less probable, I feel like I'm not in control. But I feel like the truth is, I was never really in control. It's just that the thing that was most probable is the thing that was happening, which aligned with what I believed to be what was going to happen.
I used to call that seeing the future. People say, you can see the future? And I'd be like, yeah, look, I bet you anything you're going to breathe in the next 30 seconds. I said, I can see the future again. You're going to be thinking right now. Right? Hey, I can see the future. You're going to be metabolizing, right? And that's all pattern recognition, and that's recognizing that idea of most probable. And it's a mind construct that we've created. It's part of what we've given attention and matter to, but it's fallible. It's not infallible. And I think that's the big important piece of that, is to recognize the fallibility of that as a tool. And it's okay that it's fallible unless we believe in it 100%. So the fallibility of a tool is okay if we also have a buffer, like, hey, there are these things called black swan events, and not everything happens to the most probabilistic outcome. And we need to look at the probability associated with an outcome, but it's not 100% perfect. And that's why we have these aberrations in our thought. It's also why AI creates these artifacts and these other kinds of output that you have to be careful for and look at. You can't just take written AI and think it's going to be all perfect. It's not. The most probable next step is not always what's going to really happen or what we even need to be doing. And so I think that's an important thing, to understand the fallibility of probability and to recognize the fallibility of our mind thinking that way, but not to abandon all logic because of it. Just be aware of the fact that how you think doesn't always mean how it's going to end up. And you can do your best for that. And you can also train your mind. You can train to actually have more access to more innate intelligence and to have more capacity to be sharper and more intelligent about how you use your mind as a tool. Something I've been working on really seriously about that is self-sabotage. And self-sabotage is where your mind is working against you instead of your mind working for you. And the most critical problem in self-sabotage is that the mind, the tool you need to navigate modern society and your modern life, has to work for you to be successful. And so there's myriads of ways that we've created self-sabotage now, but it simply goes back to this understanding, wow, my mind, the way I'm thinking is actually working against me. And we have to learn how to flip that and pin it so that the mind only works for me, not my mind, like the way I'm thinking, in this kind of light machine that we have in our head called the brain, is actually working for me, not against me.
Yeah, and that is something that I think is a lot. It seems to be a lot easier said than done, right? We have all of these experiences, all these things that we go through that create certain beliefs around who I think I am, what I think I'm capable of, what I think I deserve, where I think I should be, all these unspoken things in a way, things that are completely unconscious. And like you said, the brain and my thoughts working against, my mind working against me rather than with me. And just to bring it back to the placing of attention, it feels like that combined with, if there's all those things already going on and occurring, and then there's this battle for our attention, it feels like it's really like pushing water uphill to actually succeed and to not self-sabotage.
You want to ask yourself where you got the self-sabotaging patterns to begin with. How did this mind get formed to be like that? And it goes back to this idea of a competition over your awareness and how you were treated when you gave your awareness to that thing. And so it's a mind bender that when you're little and people are speaking to you in a way that is negative to you, that you flip that and orient that to now a self-harming pattern. And when people are telling you that you're bad or wrong all the time, you turn that into I'm bad and wrong, and you train your brain to treat yourself that way. Mm-hmm. And so you can go back into your life and see that we've created these patterns. And then once the pattern's created where I'm good and bad to myself, now it's very easy to manipulate me with all different kinds of marketing and propaganda and sales to tweak me and nudge me into a certain kind of behavior. And all of that becomes a self-sabotaging pattern that may or may not be really suited to my best interest. And so you have to first, if you want to address self-sabotage, is make the decision and the commitment to yourself to address the patterning that was created here. And you have to address it in real time. You're going to be doing it at the same time that you are continuing to self-sabotage. And so this came to one of the core early teachings I received from my teachers, which was you have to decide. You have to decide to address it and take it on as like a personal project, so that in that decision, you are actively working to reprogram your mind while you know that you're being, at the same time, affected by your own self-sabotage. And little by little, you can work through it. And it's something that I teach in our mystery school and in our certification programs and on our retreats.
So beyond matter, something I actually wanted to ask you about is around spirits, around dark energies, around things that, just thinking about fear. What's going on beyond matter that most people don't see, aren't aware of, that may actually very much matter?
Going back to that piece that you said about vibration, spirit and spirits are forms of energy that are part of this universe. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to say they exist or don't exist with any kind of real clarity. They're just part. It's a way of understanding the universe. So what people, when they talk about spirits, are referring to are these great cosmic forces that we see over and over again exist. And in science, we've given them different names. And so these forces exist whether we like it or not. They're in our consciousness. Like the spirit of envy or jealousy affects you when you have the emotions of jealousy and envy. The spirit of generosity affects you when you have it. The spirit of the sun is what is causing light to be emitted from the sun and heat that affects the earth. The spirit of the wind is the blowing of the wind. It doesn't matter whether you want to describe it scientifically, like, oh, that's high pressure, low pressure, temperature, etc. For our ancestors and the indigenous people, they just call that spirit. That's their way of describing a phenomena. And because of that, and you break down the phenomena from that like big vibration to the little vibrations, all the myriad of vibrations within you can be described as a kind of spirit. And so what you give attention to and what matters within you has everything to do with spirit. And it's a importance to understand that, so that you can guide and direct the nature of spirit or the nature of your vibration or the nature of your energy. Like those are all part of the same family. And so when you have spirit and you allow yourself to feel life and you allow yourself to feel the different kinds of energies that course through you, you can change your vibration. And that's like a technique that the indigenous figured out. You could be down and you could call the spirit of something that's high vibration and you could become high vibration, like it's contagious. Or you could be really negative and you could find the vibration of things that represent great positivity and you could flip that. Or you could be sick and you could find vibrations that represent great vitality and you could create health. And so I think when we discuss spirit and the understanding of it, on the furthest fringe of what we're talking about might be like the idea of a ghost or, some phantasm or something like that that's been so popularized by something like Hollywood. But what we're really talking about is vibrations and the codification or classification of those vibrational states. And they have utmost importance to everybody, whether they believe in them or not.
And on that fringe, if we were to think about entities, phantoms, that type of thing, in your belief, your experience, do they exist?
To me, it's obvious that these things exist, right? But it doesn't mean they exist in a way that we relate to or understand. There's no way, just like we were saying, the mind, its ability to imagine doesn't mean it imagines correctly what somebody's talking about. Mm-hmm. right? So somebody says the ohm is the vibration of the universe, and then somebody ohms, ohm, and then they imagine that some disenfranchised body God is like in a chair going ohm and emanating a universe. Not that the ohm is a sound symbol, like a word to represent the cosmic forces of the emergence of sound on the most cosmic scale of the universe. So do entities exist? They exist for humans because humans talk about them. They exist for you because you just created the word for it. They exist in people's DMT trips because they talk about it all the time. People can draw what they saw. They exist inside the mind, and they exist inside this collective field of consciousness. They exist enough to create effigies and statues of things we've never seen with our eyes, like the great demigods from our mythologies. So they have to exist. And to me, the big question is, well, how? And I think that's what we want to explore.
And if that's the big question, do you have a big answer?
Well, the way to explore it is through visionary experiences, breath work, meditation, and the use of intention. And a core of my practice over the last 20 years has been to ask the big question and then go into a completely neutral, wide open space to get an answer. And any bit of an answer is helpful for putting together a bit of a map or some kind of context for these really big questions. Like in my life, it started with having visionary experiences and not understanding what a vision is and wanting to better understand vision, et cetera, ad infinitum. This kind of just continued to expand. And so, I think the best techniques I have are the ones that I teach. It starts in having a safe place to be able to even ask these questions in case we got a real answer. Like you're in a yoga class invoking Shiva. What happens if Shiva actually physically appears in the room right in that moment? You better be ready. So I think you better have like a safe place. I'm not sure that little yoga studio in the bamboo floor is going to support Shiva's, physical presence if Shiva arrived that day. We just don't know. And that's, part of what we go into. So you want to have a sanctuary, and then from there, you want to be able to be supported by people who know how to handle the depth and ferocity of those kinds of experiences. And that's the role of the master shaman or master guide. And then you want to be open to being able to ask the really big questions and having that be okay.
All right. So I feel like I've got maybe three more questions that I feel like will just tie the thread on matter. Why does that matter to you? The big questions, the exploration of the big questions.
The thing that matters most in the entire universe is you. The thing that matters most in the entire universe is you, because there's no explanation for you. And so if you don't ask those questions, all you will ever be during this life is a figment of your own imagination. And so the only gateway to being able to understand you is to ask that question. Everything else about you that you believe, you've been told. Everything else about you, you've been told. And so you have to ask that question so that you can move beyond the imagination of yourself and just tap into one drop of the mystery that you really represent here in this universe.
Yeah, it feels like if someone can't see or realize that they matter, why would anything else matter?
And I'm not saying that you're the center of the universe. I'm just saying that you're the center point of your awareness. You're the nexus point of matter, physical matter, which has no explanation, with consciousness, which has no explanation. And the formation of the mind has no explanation. And yet we use the confluence of those three things, your matter, your consciousness, and your mind, to have any interaction, any culture, any intimacy, anything that we talked about. So the things that we take most for granted, you just wake up and start making coffee and brushing your teeth and putting on your clothes to go to work, all of that started in things that we have no explanation for. So I think that those questions are worth asking when we're alive. And for me personally, it would be a travesty, like a deep sadness, a true travesty to not explore that while I was alive and to be conscious of it while I was alive. And so that has fueled me since my early 20s.
And culturally, it seems as though maybe that doesn't matter so much to people within the culture. What do you think happens if this keeps playing out, where the placing of our attention on what matters is so far removed from what truly matters?
If we don't place our awareness on what truly matters, catastrophe awaits us. There's something going on here of Earth that humans take for granted, which is what Earth is doing. And humans finally are in a time when collectively we can understand what Earth is doing, but we're playing games with ourselves to not look at what Earth is doing. And at most, I hear people in the collective zeitgeist talk about what humans are doing to the Earth, but not what Earth is doing, period. And we have to understand what Earth is doing and get in alignment with that to be able to maintain our relevance, or we won't have relevance. And the catastrophe is our extinction, like has happened to most other species that Earth has created. And so my description of extinction is when you become irrelevant, you become extinct. And so if we don't want to become extinct, we have to prove our relevance in our alignment with Earth's evolution, and that becomes the core focus.
I think we did a good job.
I think we did. I think at least we proved we matter. And with that, we can do something about it.
Yeah, if we know that we matter, then there's reason to do everything else, right?
I believe so.
Love it. I will add in the description links for people to be able to find you, Blue Morpho, the Academy. Is there anything else that you'd like the people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, we have Blue Morpho, which has been going on for the last 20 years, and we have retreats if you want to come meet in person and experience the plant medicines and go on a deep dive into everything that we've been talking about. And we have an academy with certification courses for people who are embracing the consciousness arts and psychedelic renaissance and want to roll in it, and a mystery school for going into this personal development questions about how we matter. And we also have a project called godai.ai, and it's an AI personal assistant for all spiritual questions, and it's been trained on the great corpus of religious and spiritual texts of the world. And so go to godai.ai and just give it a try. You can try it for free. And I think the final message I want to put out there is, realize how important you are. You're not just a blip in history. You're changing the universe in everything that you do. And so know that you matter and trust in that. And let's do something amazing with that together.
I love it. I'm aware of the time, so I feel like I want to kind of honor your schedule and not run over, but I feel like I could have gone for at least another hour. So I'm sure we'll do another one, as this is, I think, is this 4 or 5 now?
It's one of those. I appreciate it, Sabri. It's a pleasure to always get to speak with you, and I love your podcast, and I'm a great supporter of everything that you're doing. So just thank you so much for letting me be here today.
Amazing. Thank you, brother. Until next time.
Amazing.